Good evening. Welcome to the W&M Washington Center's 20th anniversary kickoff event. We are thrilled to have you here tonight as we take a look back at 2001 at the very beginning. My name is Roxanne Adler-Hickey, and I am the interim director of the W&M Washington Center. I am honored to have been serving at the center since 2006. This event is the first of many this year that we will bring to you and the entire William & Mary community as we reflect upon and celebrate the past, present, and future of the Washington Center. In light of the virtual world in which we now live, we will also be releasing content through a video series, which premieres tonight. I am joined this evening by so many people who have made this event, this video, and the last 20 years possible. So it would be impossible to thank them all, but I'd like to highlight a few. First, to the visionary leaders of William & Mary today, President Rowe, Provost DeGoris, and Vice Provost Anne-Marie Stock, within whose purview the Washington Center resides. Thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your inspiration. To the members of the Washington Center Advisory Board, many of whom are here tonight, and especially our chair, Scott Wilkinson, thank you for your ongoing dedication and your commitment to our work. Our future is bright and opportunities for students abound because of your generosity. To the current team of the Washington Center, Erin, Molly, Reiss, Elizabeth, and Gabe, your incredible colleagues. Our students, faculty, staff, and alumni are lucky to have you here, and so am I. To the members of the 20th Anniversary Planning Committee, specifically David Carter, Megan Comey-Thomas, Nataki Cornet, Matthew Erpelding, Kayla Sharp, and Tim Von Stetten, your commitment to helping us design an anniversary year fitting to William & Mary is incredible. To Roy Peterson and Kayla Sharp, thank you for being the creative geniuses behind this video series. Roy, your talent and your dedication to this project has been tremendous, and we are grateful to you both. Finally, and most importantly, tonight, I'd like to recognize Susan Wayland, without whom the Washington Center would not exist as it does today. As the first center director, she set us on a path to success. The following video, which I present to you now, features Anne-Marie Stock interviewing Susan about her experiences as a student at William & Mary and how she started it all 20 years ago.
The William & Mary Washington Center integrates academics and experiential learning to produce high-impact opportunities for all. For 20 years, we facilitated meaningful connections and provided a place of belonging for the entire William & Mary community. As we celebrate William & Mary in Washington, we'll be bringing you monthly videos that celebrate the center's rich history and consider its future. Our first video in the series features the center's first ever director, Susan Wayland, as she is interviewed by our Vice Provost, Anne-Marie Stock. Both women were essential to founding the vision of the Washington Center.
Okay, here we go. I'm wondering if there's a place at William & Mary that has really drawn you in, one of those places where when you're on campus, you want to check in there if you can, you want to go there because it holds special meaning for you perhaps from the time that you were a student.
Well, for me, and probably for a lot of students, it would have to be the Sunken Garden. You know, I spent so many wonderful hours there studying and chatting with my friends and just looking at the beauty that was surrounding me. I was very, very interested in environmental issues back when I was a student. And we had rivers catching on fire because they were so polluted with oil slicks on top of them. And so I was graduating at about the time that the Environmental Protection Agency was formed, which was in 1970. I left William & Mary with the idea that I was going to do something to make the environment better for future generations.
Susan, what was the original vision for the Washington Center, and what was your roadmap for moving forward?
Well, let me first say that the vision for the Washington Center originated in Williamsburg, not with me. And that vision was to provide exciting opportunities for students, faculty, and alumni that were only possible from a base in Washington. But even more than that, it would be a platform for William & Mary to spread its wings and engage in national and international level leadership. You ask about a roadmap. Well, there was no roadmap. I used to say that the greatest and most exciting thing about this new job was that I had a blank slate and no roadmap. And the most intimidating thing was, oh my gosh, it's a blank slate and there is no roadmap.
So how did you move from there? You started with nothing. You said a blank slate, no roadmap, and you began to build something that would be valuable for the entire William and Mary community and beyond.
Well, first of all, Tim Sullivan had established a truly amazing committee on campus that was chaired by Mitchell Reiss. Mitchell had worked for Colin Powell in Washington in a previous job, and he was very well connected to the whole international scene in Washington. With all of his contacts in Washington, had secured great space for the office in the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace Building. So it was just the perfect place to have this exciting new office. For my challenges, the first challenges were really extremely basic. We had offices without a stick of furniture in them. We did not have any operating telephones, no fax machines, no copying machines. It was really a very naked office that we inherited. So I was used to working in an office of thousands of people, and all of a sudden there I was, all by myself with non-operating telephones. So one of my first tasks was to hire an executive assistant. And I decided to hire a terrific young man. His name was David Carter. And David was a senior at William & Mary at the time. And after David left to attend law school at William & Mary, and by the way, he's a very successful lawyer now in Washington, D.C., I was so fortunate to hire another fantastic alum whose name is Susan Crane. And she was also a really terrific professional. And Susan and David were just joys to work with. Now, another hire I made early on was a summer intern. And she was a student at the at the School of Education. And she called me out of the blue. And I was totally bowled over by her energy and her enthusiasm and her obvious intelligence. And that young woman is Roxanne Adler, who is the current interim director of William & Mary. And she remains a dear friend of mine until this day. Another thing that was helpful to me in getting the office off to a good start was that Tim Sullivan included me in retreats that he had with his senior management team at William & Mary. And so that provided me with the opportunity to share with them what we were doing and what our goals were. This was truly an all-star team. If you were playing in the Olympics, these are the people that you would want with your t-shirt on because they really were fabulous innovators, thinkers, strategic planners.
Would you be willing to share some milestones, particular accomplishments? I know you're exceedingly humble and generally reluctant to toot your own horn, but it would be great if you'd share some of the things that you're most proud of.
One of the things I'm proudest of is the collegial process that we used to get the office up and running. It was a group of people who worked well together and who supported one another and who were excited about the vision of what could happen in DC. I'm very proud that we developed that initial strategic plan that has stood the test of time. And it was the roadmap for getting from an office with no furniture in it to the bustling, busy, fabulous place it is today. I have a great memory of the ribbon cutting ceremony that we had for the office. And we had the president and a lot of all the dream team come up to to help cut the ribbon. And that memory stays in my mind because it was the culmination of a lot of years of work that did not involve me at all. I mean, it was done on campus, and there were a lot of thoughts on campus. But the ribbon cutting was sort of a very symbolic moment that has always stuck in my mind.
Kudos to you. And would you share some thoughts on the Washington Center today?
Oh, well, of course, I'm thrilled with the Washington Center today. I mean, my successor, Adam Anthony and Roxanne Adler, took some of these early ideas and they have made them into reality. We had dreamed about a semester-long program, which is pretty complex. I mean, you got to think about, so where are you going to house them, and how are you going to keep them safe, and how are we going to get the internships that they will need to really learn what they need to learn for the semester. So the staff has expanded, the opportunities have expanded, and the relevance of the center is greater now than it ever was before.
So could you have imagined way back when what the center would become today?
Well, yes, I could imagine what it could have been, but I think it has exceeded all of the expectations of those of us who were the pioneers in trying to make this happen. And William & Mary has dealt a lot with government issues, public policy issues, been in the forefront of a lot of those discussions. And so this was just such a natural outgrowth of what the campus had already been focused on a lot for all of its 300 years, really. And I'm just thinking that the Washington Center was such a perfect next step for the campus to have, to have that immediate and interpersonal actions and reactions with the people who are actually doing the work. It's great to read the books and it's great to have your classroom opportunities, but the next step to me is talking to the people who are slugging it out, who are testifying before Congress, and who are trying to make sense of the policies that are evolving around you. And I just think it's a very valuable add-on to the William & Mary experience that really brings the vibrancy, the complexity, the difficulty in marrying science and policy. It's just a wonderful place in order to bring it all together.
I hope you all enjoyed watching that video as much as I did. Thank you again to Vice Provost Anne-Marie Stock and inaugural Washington Center Director Susan Wayland. You've set the stage for a robust discussion this evening, but before we turn to Susan and her fellow panelists, I'd now like to introduce you all to President Katherine Rowe. President Rowe is a nationally recognized leader in digital innovation of the liberal arts and became the 28th president of William & Mary on July 1st, 2018. A noted leader, teacher, scholar, and entrepreneur, President Rowe is a passionate advocate for the relevance of the liberal arts and sciences in a rapidly changing world. Under her leadership, William & Mary has advanced a whole institution approach to learning, successfully closed its $1 billion For the Bold campaign, and affirmed a statement of vision, mission, and values. We are honored to have her leading us at William & Mary and thrilled that she is able to be here tonight. Please join me in welcoming President Rowe as we consider the past, present, and future of the William & Mary Washington Center.
Thank you, Roxanne. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I need a thumbs up from somebody because I always forget to unmute, but looks like we got some thumbs ups. It's really a pleasure to join you and kick off this milestone year. The Washington Center exemplifies William & Mary's vision to transcend boundaries, connecting classrooms with work experiences, current students with alumni, and connecting William and Mary with the capital in a deep way where so many, more than 20,000 of our community live and work. So I'll say more about this in a few moments, but I want to begin by recognizing the leaders and the colleagues who've molded the William and Mary Washington Center over the past 2 decades. My predecessors, Tim Sullivan and Taylor Reveley, large shoes to fill, colleagues that I really cherish for their wisdom and their support and counsel. Mitchell Reiss, Stewart Gamage, Susan Wayland, Adam Anthony, Interim Director Roxanne Adler-Hickey, Vice Provost for Academic Affairs Anne-Marie Stock, and the wonderful talented team that we have here at the Washington Center. I think this might have been the first William and Mary campus that I visited after I was appointed, and it's such a delight to be back here. The reflections that you hear this evening illuminate remarkable growth that's happened over the past 2 decades. Many of you will remember that the center began in 2001 as an office. Susan Wayland needed to borrow chairs, I'm told, from down the hall to run a meeting. We'll have to hear if that's right. In 2005, the Washington Center saw the launch of its first academic programs with just 18 students. And today, hundreds of students study here. I also want to recognize all of those students and alumni who have attended programs at the center and who are joining us from across the ether. Welcome. And I especially want to thank the alumni who have served as speakers, mentors, networkers, and internship supervisors. Still more supporters have generously contributed to the William and Mary Washington Center. More than 50,000 in study in DC scholarships are awarded annually, 50,000. Thanks in large part to the center's advisory board. Milestones such as this one right now, tonight, call us into reflection on the past and the accomplishments that we've made and the lessons that we've learned. They're also an opportunity to chart the path forward together. And this anniversary comes as William and Mary and higher education as a whole are thinking about the future, asking ourselves what matters to carry forward and how we've changed. So I want to take a moment to share with you the landscape that I'm seeing nationally, and then I'll turn to the topic that you've asked me to speak about, which is how we're thinking about the future of learning at the Washington Center. And I'll leave you with just touching lightly on 2 opportunities that I'm tracking. I'm incredibly interested in hearing the opportunities that you see on the horizon. So let me start with what we all know, which is that our nation is at a moment of very profound transformation. 10 months into pandemic, so many are feeling the strain of uncertainty that's compounded by the evident, palpable, deep division that we're experiencing in the country, by isolation, by concern for the safety and health of those that we love. And there's also good reason to hope, too, finally. Multiple vaccines have been approved and already being administered to those who are most vulnerable and to our frontline healthcare workers, thanks to incredible work by the world's scientists. So now's the time that we need to be thinking about what it's going to look like when we're together once more, when we're able to be together in the ways that we choose. It's not too soon to start thinking that way, although there is still so much weariness. And I know you'll find the sense of energy and exhilaration that comes from thinking forward in that way. There is not going to be, I believe really firmly, there is not going to be a snapback to 2019's business as usual. The transformations that we thought would be arriving in 20 years are likely to be arriving in 10. Many of you have heard me say that the ones that we anticipated in 10 years are probably going to be here in 3. And at the same time, we're seeing real growth in the flexibility and adaptability in our commitments to service at William and Mary. More broadly, I think higher education success is going to depend on our ability to apply the lessons that we've learned under pandemic and to address the challenges and opportunities that are opening up. So I thought I would touch on 2 key opportunities I see from William and Mary as a whole and for the Washington Center in particular. The first opportunity is one that I have been waiting for a long time and really welcome, which is that the story about what liberal arts education is about and the story about how to prepare for professional life Those two stories are fully intertwined now. We are done with what I think has long been a false opposition that many elite liberal arts institutions held to, which is that we have to think about preparation for citizenship in the global world, that we have to think about preparation for lives as complex thinkers and problem solvers and community members, in opposition to preparation for pursuing passionately one's professional interests. Right now, students are graduating into an incredibly uncertain economy. I know the other academics, longtime academics in this room and academic leaders know that under every recession, we see that the impact is quite devastating on graduating cohorts, including underemployment, decreased job satisfaction, consequences for families that can last even decades. Students from underrepresented and low income backgrounds are especially at risk. Veterans, first-gen students are especially at risk for those consequences. So I don't think that higher education can afford the luxury of thinking about relationships with students just as 2 or 4 year relationships, and the relationship between a liberal arts education and professionalism as something that's going to grow over the 5 years after graduation. We are preparing students for the 5th job, and we are preparing them for the 1st job now. Across the nation, we're seeing that universities are positioning resources to help students chart their careers and think in a long-term way about the paths they want to pursue and land that critical 1st job, without which they can risk permanent detour. So over the past 2 decades, the Washington Center has been one of the petri dishes and think tanks for this mode of work at William & Mary, developing deep expertise in expanding career pathways for students and alumni and linking them together in those passionate pursuits. The center has pioneered robust partnerships with alumni and with professional and policy leaders, so that students can test out potential pathways through wide-ranging internships and be in classes as they're doing that, really intertwine those modes of work. And so alumni can engage in informative programming and networking opportunities for our students. So I want to think about how, as we look forward, even we've just closed a marvelous, bold campaign. In 2 or 3 years, we'll be kicking off the next one, how we can pursue those intertwined goals of growing service-minded, policy-minded problem solvers, complex thinkers, and growing pathways that they pursue into their professional lives. The second opportunity, I think, is a really simple, long-standing one at William & Mary, simple to describe and yet hard to achieve, which is to cultivate deep and meaningful human connections within our community. The connections that are forged at William & Mary are among our university's most cherished assets. And under pandemic, our understanding of how important those connections are has deepened in really profound ways. Right now, there is a real longing for connection that transcends generations, perspectives, expertise, experiences, race, sexuality, many other categories of experience where bridging differences is very challenging. William & Mary's mission is about bringing people together. We convene great minds and great hearts to solve the most pressing challenges of our time. And William & Mary's Washington Center is a nexus for those deep connections. DC, as many of you, all of you know, is the home to the largest population of William & Mary graduates and family members, parents, and supporters of many kinds. Faculty, staff, and students from across the university come together here with alumni to learn, to mentor and be mentored, to work, meeting the truly pressing needs that we are seeing all around us right now. Doing that requires that we expand and strengthen these connections. So as we look forward to the next decade, I'm so eager to think with you about the ways we can continue to adapt. William & Mary has proved that we can adapt fast, and I think very few of us would have predicted that of higher education broadly and William & Mary specifically before the pandemic. But I'm tremendously proud of the work that so many staff and faculty colleagues have been able to accomplish, and so many students have partnered in. And I'm so grateful for the support of alumni all over the country and here, all over the world, I should say, and here. So I'm confident in the weeks and the months and the years ahead that this center is going to continue to grow and change. But I see those two, that opportunity of integrating liberal arts and professional life, and that deep, longstanding commitment to connection across our community. I see those as anchors for the kinds of future thinking that you will be doing together. And I'm grateful for your partnership in that thinking to ensure that the Washington Center and William & Mary will continue to thrive as a remarkable innovator for innovation for the next 20 years and for all time coming. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your words, your leadership, and your vision, President Rowe. We're really grateful to have you with us tonight and appreciate you setting the stage for the next portion of this evening.
It's going to be really exciting. Have fun. I'm leaving you in wonderful hands.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce you all to Susan Wayland. You heard a bit about Susan's background and her leadership in starting the center already in our video. You also heard that I was her intern 20 years ago. I look up to her in the same way now that I did then, and that is with utmost admiration and respect for her tremendous ability to lead and to inspire those around her. Her passion, her enthusiasm, and her energy are contagious, as I'm sure you will see tonight. So without further ado, Susan, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne. And if we could see the rest of the panel, please come on in. Thank you, Roxanne, and thank you for that way too generous introduction. As you could see from the video, I was really privileged to have the opportunity to be the first director of the Washington Center. And it is now my privilege also to introduce you to 4 of the superstars. And I do not use that term casually, for the superstars who really made it all happen. And first, we're going to hear from Timothy Sullivan, who was the 25th president of William & Mary, and the person who was the chief executive of William & Mary, who made the decision that we would have a presence in Washington, D.C. Next, we'll hear from Mitchell Reiss, who at the time was the dean and director of the Reves Center for International Studies. And he was the chair of the committee that I referred to in the video that incorporated all aspects of the campus life and brought that kind of thinking into the formulation of the roadmap for the Washington office. Then we'll hear from Stewart Gamage, and Stewart was the vice president for public affairs at the time. And she has had a tremendous background in the political arena, both in Washington, D.C. and in Richmond. And finally, we will hear from Taylor Reveley, who was the 27th president of William & Mary. And Taylor's got a particularly unique view on the Washington Center, as he was one of the early creators and innovators who was a member of the committee that we have referred to before. And as a law school dean, was a client of that early office. But then, of course, as the president of the university, he was able to supervise its growth and nurturing throughout the years. So without further ado, Tim, I think I'd like to start with you.
Well, thank you.
I know, Tim, you put a lot of your thought and your personal energy into developing William & Mary's presence in the nation's capital. And I'm wondering if you would share with all of us kind of the big picture that you had in mind, and share with us some of the lessons, the observations, the memories that you might want to to tell us all about, because your leadership was so important to getting us off the ground.
Well, thank you, Susan. First, I want to express my appreciation to the leadership team, college today, for its recognition that this anniversary is worth remembering and celebrating. I appreciate that. And I'm also very, very impressed by the wisdom of the powers that be in asking you to organize this activity. And you've done an extraordinary job, just as you did as our pioneering director. So I want to make those acknowledgments first. When I sought the presidency of the college, I learned a lot. And when I was lucky enough to be chosen president, one of the first things I did was to undertake a strategic plan. I believe it was the first such plan the college had ever done. With a history as long as ours, you can't be sure it was the first, but I'm making a guess that it was. And I was lucky in that our provost, then provost Jillian Sell, who chaired that effort, was an extraordinarily able leader. She did a great job, along with some other fine members of the community. One of the things that the strategic plan made clear was that we were a very sound institution, good qualities, great virtues, but we were in Williamsburg, wonderful place. All of us listening, I think, loved it and still do. But it is not, it was once the capital of Virginia. It hasn't been for a long time. And it's certainly not a world capital. And it was time, it seemed to me and to the members of the Strategic Planning Committee, for William and Mary to make a statement about what we believe the future of the college ought to be. And that is a player in national and global events. And so, having made that judgment, the question was, how do we best do it? And as is always the case, at least in my lifetime at William and Mary, and I suspect many of the others here, you had to figure out how to do it with not enough money. So we weren't going to do 15 campuses around the world like New York University or some other places have. We had to pick a spot and do the best we could. And it seemed obvious to many of us that that spot had to be Washington. Not terribly far from Williamsburg, not just our nation's capital, but a center of world influence and policy, finance, all kinds of things. In addition, so many of our students and alumni either from that area or live there. So it just seemed a very natural thing to do. The idea at the beginning was to find a great physical space, and we did in the Carnegie Building. It's an extraordinary venue and just about perfect for what we wanted to do at that time. And beyond that, it would allow us to begin to put some meat on the bones of a vision that was, to call it skeletal was probably giving it too much credit. But we saw opportunity to create new learning experiences for faculty, students, and alumni. But we also saw an opportunity to allow the leaders of the William and Mary community to translate their tremendous leadership and academic skills into a form that would allow them to speak with credibility on the national and international scene. So it was a mix of that bigger idea about growing William and Mary's influence nationally and internationally, and also at the same time providing opportunities for education, internships, learning and experience that we couldn't offer in Williamsburg. And I think, based on everything I know, this now the Washington Center has exceeded anyone's hopes. That is, the hopes of those who were around when it was established. We were lucky in that we had an outstanding committee on the campus planning for this effort once the decision was made to do it. We also had a very fine advisory committee of friends and alumni of the college who were all Washington based. It was chaired by Bill Harmon, a great person, fine lawyer, one of the first William & Mary people I know to make a big impact in Washington. And those two groups together helped us get it off to the right start. And perhaps the most interesting catalyst was really down to Mitchell Reiss. Mitchell was a wonderful addition to our leadership team. He's had a great deal of Washington experience then, has had more since. He came to me one day. I think he probably talked to Jill Sell, our provost, before he talked to me with the word, there's this Carnegie building up in Washington. And I think there may be some space we could use to found the William & Mary Center. And being relatively ignorant, it sounded good, but once I saw that building, I knew it was the place to go. And so Mitchell helped moderate or at least mediate the relationship between the Carnegie Endowment people and the college. And so we started there. And a great deal of our success is due to that location. But Mitchell is the one who found it. And I would say he's certainly rightly a part of this roundtable of people who were there at the beginning and who helped build this great part of William & Mary to the place it is today. So I appreciate the chance to share a little of those very beginnings, and anxious to hear from my fellow panelists.
Thank you so much, Tim. As always, you are so articulate, and you've painted a wonderful beginning of the creation of this office, and a perfect segue to introduce Mitchell Reiss to you. As I said before, Mitchell was the Dean and Director of the Reves Center for International Studies at the time. And Mitchell, I have kind of a 2 or maybe 3 or 4 part question for you. But first is, would you please tell us a little bit more about the terrific committee that you chaired on campus, because they did amazing work and I was the real beneficiary of all that. But then go on to express your own hopes and desires for the office, what you were planning on in terms of the international connections that could be made in Washington, and also the opportunities for the students, the faculty, and alum in the area. So without further ado, please welcome Mitchell Reiss.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Tim, for those very generous remarks. The center really would not have been anything more than words on paper if it wasn't for your leadership. The planning committee was cast as broadly as possible so that we could include as many people as possible from as many different areas on campus, so that people felt invested from the very beginning in the Washington campus. And so we've already heard some of those names who were on the planning committee this evening: Stewart, Gamage, Taylor, then the Dean of the Law School, Anne Marie Stock. But just let me fill out the rest of the names because they deserve recognition: Jeff Feiss, General Jim Golden, Ginny McLaughlin, Don Wright, Dennis Cross, Mary Schilling, and the wonderful, wonderful Shirley Aceto. So it really was a team effort. And the idea, again, was that everybody would get excited about being part of the Washington campus, that they would share that with their fellow colleagues, and that would be translated down to the students, which after all was really the main purpose of the campus itself. The idea, I think, as you and Tim have mentioned, was that so much of the ethos and culture of William & Mary is public service. And so the idea of a presence in our nation's capital, where you'd have opportunities for internships, which are so important for launching people on the right career path, would be possible for students who are public service oriented, as we know so many of our students are. And so that really was the driving force. How can we help the students better achieve their potential and their aspirations? And it's easy to remember, it's easier to forget. Tim alluded to it. There wasn't a lot of money back then. And so we had to be creative with how we did things. And I do think we borrowed furniture. We got a very good deal from the Carnegie Endowment. Actually, the space was subleased at that time, I remember, to the Council on Foreign Relations. So I talked to the president, L.L.D, and they helped us out. And of course, Susan, your leadership was irreplaceable at the beginning as well. And then it's just grown by leaps and bounds. It's not just for the students. I'm really pleased that so many faculty have taken advantage of this campus in the heart of Washington, D.C. So it shows what can happen with the right type of vision, with broad participation, and of course, with the talent and ambition of our students. So it's really a great thing to celebrate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mitchell. And I certainly remember with great fondness all of the interactions with you and your amazing committee. You all truly inspired me. And I love coming to work every day because I knew that this was something that was important and it was something that was so well thought out and supported by the college. So now we're going to move to Stewart Gamage. Stewart, as you know, was the vice president for public affairs at the time. And several people, myself included and President Rowe included, have alluded to the fact that we really did start out with no furniture. And the very first meeting that we had in the Washington office was between Stewart Gamage and me. And we indeed had to go scouring around the Council on Foreign Relations for some chairs to bring into the office so we could sit and talk to each other. So Stewart, you were there at the beginning, and I know that your thoughts and your hopes for the future for the office are incredibly important to the foundation that we are now enjoying. So Stewart, why did you think it was a wonderful idea to establish a presence in the nation's capital?
Well, first of all, Susan, thank you to you and to the whole team in the Washington office, the Washington Center now. You all have been a remarkable group and have really gotten us where we are today. So thanks to all of you. It's quite a privilege to be on a panel with 4 college presidents. I feel like I'm in good company here. So I'll try to at least sort of back up everything that you and Tim and Mitchell have said, and then we'll have Taylor do the close. For me, the really first question was why Washington? And Mitchell really was sort of an anchor to that conversation. He'd spent a lot of his life work there, both as the director of the Reves Center, but also sort of hot off the trail of coming back, working with Colin Powell in the State Department. So we really had sort of a ringer for starters to help shape that conversation. The most important thing to me was, how do we really create this set of building blocks between students, faculty, alums, ultimately donors? And if you think, what do students want? Students want a foothold in the marketplace, that first job, that first sort of professional experience. And as Mitchell alluded to, how do we set the stage for getting them that? President Rowe mentioned we have 20,000 alums in the Washington area. If we could tap into that, that's a great resource for our students getting sort of that first step, that first place in the rung on that ladder. Faculty are looking for a platform for their ideas. And I think the Washington Center, by bringing the faculty to teach the brightest and the best right there in Washington, gave us a chance to see what that academic platform could look like. What do alums need? Well, right now, thousands of them are looking for jobs, probably. Every 4 years, there's a big upheaval in the Washington job market, people wanting new and better jobs and people that have just lost one. And I think you and others in the Washington office sort of anticipated, if we could give those folks who have recently been displaced a desk, a place for their computer, a place to plug in, charge their cell phone, all of a sudden we become a safe harbor for them. And an experience that frankly they'll never forget at a time when they're really quite desperate to find their next job. So I think sort of these building blocks of students looking for internships, faculty looking for this academic platform, alums looking for a job. And then if we do those first things right, I think we're able to bring in somebody like Matthew Lambert to close the deal and really cultivate the next generation of donors. So that was sort of our idea of what that foundation could look like, how those building blocks could contribute to that. How well have we done in 20 years? I guess what I would say is I ran into a colleague from Brookings on the sidewalk a number of years ago. And he said, let me tell you, and this was unsolicited, he said, who's got the best office in Washington of the 130 schools? He said, I'd tell you, it's the College of William and Mary. So high praise and quite a compliment from somebody who really knows the difference in a good program and a great one. So I think, we're in the right place, in the right space at the right time with the right talent. So maybe when we wrap up, we can sort of circle back to, what the future might bring, but thinking of really in particular experiences like with the Harriman Fellowships, ways that we could grow this network that Ambassador Harriman had. The William and Mary Washington Center has helped staff that. We now have had 60 Harriman Fellows who've served in Paris and London and Washington, and really a great compliment to their own schools and to William and Mary. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the reestablishment of our Chancellor's Program, something that Paul Verkyle, Tim Sullivan, Taylor, and more recently Katherine Rowe have been able to build upon. If you think about what those individuals, people like Bob Gates, have brought to William and Mary, how we build that into the next generation of our Washington experience, maybe creating sort of this academic intellectual interstate between Washington and Williamsburg. I think there's real opportunity there. Everyone wants to have a career like Bob Gates, and they have to sort of figure out how they get that started. And I think there's a real opportunity to bring that talent to Williamsburg, maybe in a partnership with Colonial Williamsburg. It's interesting, you might ask the question, why does everyone stepping down from their job go to the Kennedy School at Harvard? It's cold. Boston isn't that much fun. And in the May term, William and Mary would be a lot more attractive. So I think we just need to think differently about how to take this talent pool from Washington and bring it down to Williamsburg, as well as taking our Williamsburg faculty, staff, and students and taking them to Washington. So I guess the last thing would be, we started off by thinking what we could get from Washington, and watching the experience in the nation's capital this last week, I would say maybe a little bit more William and Mary in Washington would be a good thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Stewart. And as always, you have very insightful observations. And certainly you and the staff that you had created in Williamsburg were always very essential to getting our office up and running. So I thank you for all that. Well, now last, and certainly not least, not ever least, we have President Taylor Reveley. Taylor was the 27th president of William and Mary. And as I alluded to at the beginning, he's got a very particular viewpoint on the Washington Center, and a much longer viewpoint than certainly I have and some of the other panelists have, because he was there at the beginning. He was definitely one of the great thinkers and innovators who contributed to the very beginnings of the office. And the law school was a wonderful client for the office and used it often. But then when he became president, he was able to look at, nurture, and really support the development and growth of the office. So with all that, Taylor, why do you really care about the Washington Center?
Well, marvelous, Susan. Let me take a stab at that. I can't remember if it was Tim or Mitchell or Stewart who first told me about the possibility that William and Mary would plant its flag in the nation's capital. But I do distinctly remember thinking, that's an inspired idea. We got to do that. And we have done it. So let me say why I think a Washington presence for William and Mary was so important and remains so important. Four thoughts. First, going to DC, in my view, was a significant step in getting William and Mary's light out from under the bushel, in bringing us and helping us to reclaim the tribe's appropriate place in the forefront of higher education. Now that's where we started. No other colonial college sent an emissary across the Great Sea to London, to England, to spend a couple of years persuading the monarch to charter the institution and to provide it with a significant stream of operating funds. Indeed, William and Mary's early financial strength was materially greater, far greater than that of Harvard, Yale, Princeton. And when the Wren building was first constructed and came online, it was one of the largest and most elegant structures in America. And William and Mary was truly an international undertaking early on. Our chancellors were in England, bishops of London, archbishops of Canterbury, an occasional earl thrown in for body and flavor. They were in England, nurturing a school across the Atlantic Ocean. And until the Revolutionary War, the college's professors came from England with one Scot. And that one Scot was an absolutely brilliant, winsome man named William Small, who was Thomas Jefferson's brilliant, beloved professor. At Thomas Jefferson's instance in 1779, William and Mary adopted a very innovative, creative curriculum and created the first law school in the United States. Phi Beta Kappa began at William and Mary. Then Mr. Jefferson turned on his alma mater. Despite having been splendidly educated at William and Mary, decided he wanted to build his own university that he could see from his mountaintop home, Monticello, and that he could design pursuant to his own architectural desires. UVA came online and proceeded to take a severe toll on William and Mary's capacity to recruit students, particularly students from wealthy families. Along came the Civil War not many years later. And when it was over, the campus of William and Mary had been a front in the war for 3 years. Buildings destroyed or terribly damaged, money gone, and our students, faculty, staff either dead or scattered. The 19th century on the whole was not good for William and Mary. And as we moved into the first half of the 20th century, ensuring survival and beginning to get moving, really, that was the order of business. Second half of the 20th century, we really started to get rolling again. And as we moved into the 21st century, William and Mary in full cry, but still not as prominent in higher education as it should be. we needed to get our light more out from under the bushel. And creating a presence for ourselves in Washington was a very meaningful step forward in that process. Second, creating a William and Mary presence in DC was a bold move of the sort that's absolutely essential to building a great university. When President Sullivan launched the initiative, there was absolutely no ready source of funds to sustain the effort. And I think it's fair to say there was limited, restrained enthusiasm for the initiative on the campus. After all, it wasn't going to be in Williamsburg. And to no little extent, funding and campus support would have to follow success on the ground in Washington and be generated by the center itself. So to launch the initiative under these circumstances took real confidence in the wisdom and the potential of the initiative. And it took leadership willing to look beyond the comfortable confines of Williamsburg and willing to take a risk. Very important precedent for bold leadership. Third, to take the tribe to Washington, D.C. was in a meaningful way, as has been noted already, to take us into an international sphere. The federal city marches in many, many respects to an international beat. Washington has become one of the great cities of the world, and it's the seat of government of what is still the most powerful nation on earth. So while going to Washington for our students and faculty wasn't as exotic as, say, studying and doing research in London, Paris, or Rome, still spending time in DC provides our students and faculty with great educational and cultural opportunities akin to those that our people get when they do study and do research abroad. And it has become increasingly important that William and Mary expand its involvement with the world. We have spent a great deal of time and energy doing that. Our presence in Washington was and is one way we make clear that we are quite serious about being global in our reach. Fourth, Washington and its hinterland and its suburbs truly are the epicenter of William and Mary alumni. There are more graduates of the alma mater of the nation in and around DC than anywhere else on earth. And it made compellingly good sense to place a center for William and Mary in their midst. And it was absolutely providential that we could house it in the elegant building of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace at 1779 Massachusetts Avenue, next to the Brookings Institution, a few blocks from the Australian Embassy, and not that far up 16th Street from the White House. It was a glorious initial venue. And of course, it was our enormous good fortune that a deeply loyal alumna of the college, who was also deeply rooted in DC, was available and interested in breathing life into William and Mary's Washington Center. And what splendid life Susan Wayland did breathe into that fledgling initiative. She got us off to a roaring start. When the sad moment came that Susan felt her time in the office had to end, Tim asked me to chair the search for a successor. This was a daunting task, given the glories of the Wayland era. After a long search, we found Adam Anthony. He too was a loyal alumnus of William and Mary, deeply rooted in DC, and enthusiastically committed to a robust William and Mary presence in Washington. Adam led the center for many years, including all 10 years of my presidency. We made a lot of progress with Adam at the wheel, and Roxanne as his extraordinarily able chief lieutenant. Among my many messages to Adam, 3 were constant: about the need for the DC Center to demonstrably be of service to the campus community and alumni, of its need to visibly wave the tribe's flag in the federal city, and of its need to find ways to generate revenue, particularly from tuition, because there was no fairy godmother for the Washington Center. The center's academic programs have grown in number and richness. DC semesters, winter seminars, summer institute, in some years involved 300 students. Faculty members have come to teach and to mentor and to do their research. A constant stream of internships have been found, crucially valuable internships for students in the Washington office. The DC Center has provided places for people from the campus to light and work while in Washington. It's been an engaging venue for lectures and alumni events. It's been a congenial setting for conversations with potential donors. It has made us proud to be present so splendidly in a great city. And it has let that great city know that William and Mary is thriving. Now, it's hard to believe it's been 20 years since the idea of William and Mary in Washington first leapt from concept to reality. But it has been 20 years. And we owe a huge debt of gratitude to Susan Wayland for getting the juggernaut rolling. The juggernaut is now rolling. So 3 cheers for the first 2 decades of William and Mary Washington Center, and 3 cheers as it moves to an even more glorious future. I'm not sure all of us are going to be around to celebrate the 40th anniversary, but it will be even more grand than the 20th. Susan, back to you.
Oh, well, thank you, Taylor. As always, you're mesmerizing and profound. And we certainly have enjoyed all of your comments for many years and tonight especially. But for the whole panel, I would just invite you, if you wish to ask each other anything, or do you have any final thoughts before I close the panel and turn it back to Roxanne? I'll just throw it open right now.
Tim, you have to unmute.
You have to unmute.
Sorry, this is a bit too much for me. I need to ask Taylor to follow up a bit on a comment he made, and it was very true. We are celebrating enthusiastically the success of an important initiative for our college. But it wasn't without some bumps in the road or a lot of skepticism, and perhaps some of the skepticism was justified. But there, I would say the enthusiasm on the campus at the time we launched this thing was limited. Taylor was I had to go around asking the deans if they'd produce $10,000 or $20,000 to help us get started. And I mean, most of them didn't think they had a choice, I suppose, but their lack of enthusiasm was pretty obvious. Taylor was genuinely delighted by the idea and was very happy to make a contribution. But Taylor, how the skepticism you described was real. What do you think were the causes of that skepticism? Maybe some justified.
I think initially it was, why on earth would William and Mary want to have an office in Washington? Just no concept of the potential or the need. And second, the eternal fear that perhaps some funds would be diverted from their department or their program or their school to fund this exotic, strange idea that the president and Mitchell and Taylor were pushing. I think William and Mary has come a very long way in the last 20 years in its aspirations and in expectations. And I think the Washington office was important in that progress. But to say that enthusiasm was limited on the campus initially would be to generously describe it.
Okay.
Susan, can I ask you a question?
Oh, but I'm not a panelist.
Well,
Sure.
maybe anybody can jump in then. So especially this evening when we're commemorating and celebrating 20 years, is it true that there remains a magnificent naming opportunity for the Washington Center?
Wow.
For somebody to endow this wonderful attribute of William and Mary's past, present, and future by leaving a legacy that will live on?
I think that sounds like a very cool idea, Mitchell. And I would just pass the ball back to Taylor and Tim and Stewart to respond to that as well. You know, I do think that there is a great opportunity with all universities with naming rights and opportunities to make endowments. And I think this would be a really fabulous place to place one's trust for the future. So Taylor and Tim, you want to address that at all?
Of course, there are always naming opportunities for the right price.
Yeah, it would need to be very high. I think it's a good idea, and I can think of, it would not appeal to everyone because many potential donors have their focus on the campus at Williamsburg, but for the right sort of person who would, let's just say, perhaps have been sympathetic to this idea from the beginning and enthusiastic about what's happened, I think there's a real possibility there. I really do.
I'm thinking of 100 million.
Well, think about, I'd like to ask my other three panelists, and Susan, you too. Let's say if you had a donor in the prospect line that Taylor was suggesting, what about a residential meeting space, academic venue, all in the same place and space? I think, you know, we've been focused sort of, Carnegie Building really cannot be topped, but if we at some point outgrow that, other universities are sort of thinking about ambitious footprints in Washington. One day I passed the Monroe House sitting next to a small boutique hotel next to a glass office building. And I thought, wouldn't this be great if William and Mary could combine those three places and spaces and have a center where you could teach and eat and live all in the same place. And Mitchell, I know you know a lot about the hospitality business, and Tim and Taylor about academic platforms, but what would it look like 20 years from now if we had the right resources to stand something like that up?
Well, I think it'd be a wonderful opportunity if we could fund it, to have a very significant academic presence in Washington. But we're talking about a lot of money.
Yeah. I think the idea is very sound. We have a tendency, and I include myself in this, to underestimate the significance of buildings in the story of institutional development. Appropriate facilities that reflect the best qualities and the aspirations of a university make a difference, really do, over time, and how far along the development of the leaders and the people involved can take their enterprise. And so if we were able to locate something like that, it would be wonderful. I did a little work for a university in Virginia after I left the presidency. They were thinking of establishing a London operation. And so I went around and, among other things, looked at some American universities that have facilities in London. And the most impressive is Notre Dame, that has a beautiful old, it was a townhome, kind of off Piccadilly. It's just fantastic space. How they financed it or on what basis, or whether it's I don't know. But if we were ever able to find something like this and then pay for it, which is the big question, I think that could be a huge step forward. And I would hope perhaps in the planning that's going to be going on with those now in charge, looking to the future, thoughts would be given both to Taylor's notion of, Mitchell's notion of endowing the center, and second, Stewart's idea of an appropriate facility or facilities. Those things ought to be part of thinking about the future of the center.
Yes, I thought it was particularly interesting that President Rowe mentioned the fact that the post-pandemic era was probably going to be really different than just going back to what was happening in 2019. We're just not going to go back there. And so we're going to have to be thinking about a lot of different ways to approach the future and how William and Mary will shape itself in order to provide the kind of fabulous educational possibilities and leadership possibilities for the future. And that may involve more thinking about outside our boundaries, but still our heart will always be in Williamsburg.
Right, of course. But it's true that Katherine's insight, I certainly share it. So we're not going to go back to what was normal in 2019, but I think in Washington particularly, the physical statement made by whatever facility we have is really important, really important. It would be anywhere, but I think in Washington, one might say image has become more important than substance, and that's not very good. But it's how you look is really important, to begin to be taken seriously when you start talking about your programs.
Yeah.
Well, let me just go around the table and just see if there are any parting thoughts. And after that, I will turn things back over to Roxanne Adler. So Tim, you were first up. So let me go to you first for our final round robin.
I think I've exhausted all the very important insights I've had. And so I would just say I'm very grateful again for the opportunity to speak about the beginnings of an enterprise that's become so important to the college.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate, like anything else that matters, teamwork and the hard work and the hands and the faith of so many have accomplished this. We've done it together. I mean, a few of us sitting around this table had roles, more visible ones, but there are hundreds of people who are not at the table, whose contributions have been cumulatively far more important than any one of ours. So I think we should remember that, not only for the future of the center, but perhaps for the college as a whole.
Well said. How about you, Mitchell? Do you have any final thoughts?
Sure, two quick points. First, I think it's clear that the center is in very good hands with Roxanne, Elizabeth, and Erin and their colleagues there. Very impressive group, and so that's really encouraging for the future. Second, I just find it amazing looking at those pictures from 20 years ago, how none of us have aged at all. So,
Thank you very much, Mitchell. I had that same feeling. It's remarkable how little we've changed.
exactly.
Oh, that's great. We need to raise a glass to that sentiment. So, Stewart, do you have any final observations or?
I never want to disagree with Mitchell, and certainly not on his last point that we haven't changed at all. He's always right. I guess I would say the best is yet to come, and that I hope the democratic values and ethics that have been a core to William and Mary might also rub off a little bit in our nation's capital in the years to come.
Well put. And Taylor, do you have any final reflections?
Well, simply to say, William and Mary's Washington Center has succeeded beyond our wildest dream, and it is very important that the university keep it going, evolving, thriving. All hail the William and Mary Washington Center.
Yay. So, well, thank you all so much. I think everyone in the audience can see why I was so excited to work with this group of people who are just so intelligent and articulate and forward thinking. And I really appreciate all of them. And as Mitchell said, or Stewart said, or Tim said, there are a lot of folks behind the scenes that are not on this webinar, but to whom we owe a huge debt of gratitude. So to those of you in the audience, I hope that this evening has been instructive and has given you an idea of how and why the Washington Center was started, and to give you a sense of the enthusiasm that we share for you in the future to keep it going and make it even better and bigger in the years to come. So, and I'd also encourage you, I bet Roxanne will too, encourage you to tune in to the next series of video events that will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Washington Center. So thank you all for being with us, and thank all of our panelists, and thank you, Roxanne, for doing such an outstanding job. So now it's back to you, Roxanne. Thank you.
Susan, Taylor, Tim, Stewart, and Mitchell, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. Thank you for all that you did to establish the William and Mary Washington Center. I truly believe that we are thriving today in a truly collaborative way, as you mentioned, about teamwork. And it's in no small part because of your early efforts to design something strong that could grow with our university as our university grows. So on behalf of my colleagues, all of those present tonight, the thousands of students that you mentioned, our faculty and staff, the alumni who've benefited from the center, thank you all. Tonight's session has been recorded and will be posted shortly on the Washington Center's 20th anniversary website. I will add that if you are interested in supporting the Study in DC Scholarship Fund that we spoke of, that President Rowe mentioned earlier, to help students benefit from the opportunities that the center provides, you will also find that information on our website, and we'll share that at the end. Most importantly, to a question that was asked earlier, yes, yes, yes to the endowment opportunities and the funding opportunities. Absolutely. You mentioned this earlier, and I certainly believe that President Rowe will have some great ideas, given what we know about her entrepreneurial spirit, about what we can do with donations and people who are interested in supporting us in that way. So just to clarify that question from earlier. But truly, thank you again, all of you, for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to continuing the celebration with all of you throughout this year, the Washington Center's 20th anniversary. Have a good night.